Well, good afternoon or good evening, I should say. Today is June 21, the year 2021. You are part of Rowan County's 6 o'clock second meeting in June. We're glad that you're here. Got a few folks with us. Welcome. Hope you find your time well spent. Did I say morning? Oh, good afternoon, good evening, good. So it's been the tradition of this board. We begin with a couple things. We're going to have a Pledge of Allegiance. We're also going to have a prayer from our chaplain, Chaplain Taylor. If you'll come on forward. This is referred to as a solemnizing prayer. This is for the commissioners. It's not for you. What we do, we take very seriously. And frankly, we know we don't have all the answers. So we look for a tremendous amount of wisdom where we can get it. And so we're going to ask for wisdom tonight through our chaplain. So commissioners, if you'll join me, we'll get started.
Lord, we thank you for the privilege to be here tonight. We thank you for our county commissioners, dear Lord, and it's not a lightly thing to say that because of the work they do and the time they spend in for all these meetings and every day of the week trying to make Rowan County better. And I pray you'll bless them and give them the knowledge they need tonight, dear Lord, and guide us and lead us tonight. We thank you for this privilege we have again tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Chaplain Taylor, and we don't take it lightly. We appreciate you as well. You come up here and spend a lot of time with us, and for that, we're very appreciative. All right. Got a few changes here. The county manager has provided us with some added items, item T, U, V, and W to the consent agenda. So do we have a motion to accept these?
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then I'll just go ahead of time on item number 4 and 5. We've got a public hearing for some text amendment changes, and right after that we have the Dragon Boat Festival issue. So if it's okay with you guys, we're just going to swap those two and make Dragon Boat number 4 and the text amendments 5. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, so we have an amended agenda. Motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, then let's see. Minutes. We have a motion to approve the minutes of June 7th. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, and then we have anyone for public comment? Nope. Okay, we'll move on then. Item number 3, public hearing for HLC 01-21. And Aaron, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Happy Father's Day, early.
Hopefully it's early. Now, to be fair, I was born on Father's Day.
Were you really?
Mhm.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So what was your birthday?
June 20th of 93.
Wow, 93.
You.
About the same time I bought this coat.
Man, we're just going to move on.
Mr. Chairman,
Half of us couldn't hear you and the other half are mad, so.
we didn't approve the consent agenda.
We didn't?
No,
You're right. Motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, good. Thank you, Craig. All right. Young man, go ahead and carry us on to item number 3.
Trying to get a full view on this. There we go. All right. So we have HLC 0121, the public hearing for the designation of the Newberry Hall House, circa 1856. This house is located at 9935 North Carolina Highway 801 out in Mount Ola. which is further referenced as parcel 70 or 763002. And the owners are Turner Correll and Patricia Hall. The Newberry Hall House is was built in 1956 and was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1982 for its architectural stylings as a Greek Revival style. The Hall family farm and its continuous operation since the establishment of the plantation here in 1856 by Major Newberry Franklin Hall is associated with the traditional architectural or agricultural economy of Rowan County because of its location on fertile soils and gentle rolling terrain in the western part of Rowan County. The farm has been a part of the tradition and success of the dairy farm established in 1879, and the Hall family have long been leaders of Rowan County agriculture. The Hall family farm is associated with the lives of the members of the Hall family who built the house in 1856 and have lived in it to the present. The original owner, Major Newberry Franklin Hall, was a local prominent planter and layman of the Presbyterian Church, where he served on the building committee and oversaw the construction of a new brick church in 1860. And he also served in the North Carolina House of Commons from 1856 to 1861. The Hall family farm embodies the distinctive characteristics of a Greek Revival style, as built in North Carolina Piedmont in the antebellum period. And the house is thought to have been built by James G. Graham and is a large, intact, two-story frame dwelling, retaining its well-crafted, handsome program and interior finish. Hall family house and its outbuildings are clustered in and around a grove of trees on the southeast side of Sherrills Ford Road. It has had a seat in the Hall's family agricultural operations since its building in 1856. And this house has continued to this day in current and family ownership, and the current resident is the great-grandson, Turner Correll Hall, and his wife. The Hall farm is one of the oldest dairy operations in Rowan County, or at least it was up until it ceased operations in the 1980s. And the original tract was about 250 acres, and it had seen fluctuation in size over the years. And there's been a few alterations to the house to expand with the family's growing needs. And then the statement of significance in this is that the Hall family house is a locally significant under the category of architecture, is one of the few examples of 19th century Greek Revival farmhouse in Rowan County. The house has undergone numerous renovations and accommodations for the Hall family and their descendants who continually own and live on the property. However, the renovations have been consistent with the design of the original building and do not distract from the architectural integrity of the property. The house with its alterations qualified for the National Register of Historic Places for architecture in 1982. Additionally, the removal of the aluminum siding that was added in the 50s restored the original wooded siding, and restoration of the porch in 2005 further enhanced the architectural integrity of the house by returning material to their origins. And then per the natural place of Register of Historic Places in 1982, the exterior additions and changes in 1930, 51, and 65 did not distract from the original symmetry or integrity of the house. So this designation is the house itself and the 1 acre upon where it's built. And this is an exterior designation only, so the interior of the house is not part of the designation. And just for reference, the existing tract that it's on is about 150 acres and is still a currently active farm. So here we can get the actual elevations of the house. And with the Greek Revival style, there's a couple of distinctions to look at. And one of them is the full facade covered porch on the front here with the square posts, along with the entrance having the flanking side windows to the entrance. And then another one of the key characteristics is the gabled roof here being of a shallow pitch. Along with this, the designation, as I said, is the house in the 1 acre building site, and it's only the exterior of the house. And the total value of those is $282,000. So that equates to approximately a $927 tax break for the 50% reduction that the historic designated properties get. And then as far as the designation procedures, the way they work is that the HLC visits the property, which they did back in 2019. They prepared a nomination and sent it to the North Carolina Historic Preservation Office. We received approval from them back in February of 2020, but as COVID hit right around that time, we haven't been able to get around to scheduling a courtesy hearing until May of this year. And you'll see in your report a reference to April 13th. That's actually the day that they scheduled the courtesy hearing for the 11th of last month. And then after approving it at the courtesy hearing, we have the public hearing today where where you'll be able to have a public hearing, then approve, deny, or table the request and the following designation ordinance. Y'all have any questions? Both me and the current owners and applicants are here as well.
If you guys would, if you'd have anything to say, feel free to come forward. You don't have to, but always like to open it up to the applicant. Okay. All right, any questions for Aaron? All right. Then we will open the floor for a public hearing. If there's anyone that's here that would like to make any comments about Historic Landmark Commission finding, now would be the time. All right, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, do we have a motion to approve HLC 0121 and the designation ordinance for this wonderful home?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, this is a beautiful home site that's been preserved over the years. And it's just a wonderful thing that they have done in preserving this home for not only Western Rowan County, but for all the county to see the architecture that was done in these times. So we'd like to thank the owners for what they're doing and also vote positively for this honor for them.
Jim told us that this looks better than the day it was built. So
Between the Halls owning this house and Graham's that built the house, that's 3/4 of the voting public in Western Rowan County. So I'm going to vote to approve that.
as you should. Well, I never miss a chance to kid with Jim, and he takes it in good stride, at least up to now. All right, well, thank you. And commissioners, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, well, thank you. Well, congratulations. Thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate it. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. We know you've done a lot with it. So congratulations to you. All right, we'll move on to the new item 4, which was item 5, but this will be for the boat festival. Aaron?
There we go. All right, so we have a permit to exceed 0321 for the annual Dragon Boat Festival. The Dragon Boat Festival is set to take place on July 24th. And this will be at the Shrine Club off of Long Ferry Road like it always is. And with the permit to exceed, there's 10 criteria we take a look at. So the first one is the timeliness of the application. We received the application on May 28th, which is well in advance of the June 21st hearing. The nature of the requested activity is a lakeside festival with boat races, games, and food vendors. The previous experience with the applicant, we've had no issues with the applicant before. The timing of the event, which is Saturday, July 24th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The activities in the vicinity of the proposed event, there are no other activities that we are aware of. The frequency of the event, this is an annual event, which we were unfortunately able to have last year due to COVID, but we're happy to have it again this year. The cultural social benefits of the event, this is The Rowan County Chamber of Commerce puts this on for their local business funds. The effect of the activity on adjacent residential uses. There are a couple of adjoining residents on the left-hand side here, but the boat racing activity takes place on the other side of the cove where there's less residents at. The previous violations, if any, by the applicant, there haven't been any. And then the adjoining property owners are notified in the mail within 72 hours of the hearing, and they were sent notice on June 9th, which was 12 days before today. Other than that, you just have to approve or table or deny the application. And I do believe the Chamber of Commerce is here as well, and they would like to say some words if they could.
All right, Lane Spalding, would you like to share a few words? Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Eds. Thank you, Commissioners. We appreciate everything that you do to help our county. This is our Dragon Boat Festival, the 7th one, and I know you guys have been there with us every year except for last year. We're looking forward to getting back. It's the best team building exercise that you can do in this community. So, and we'd like to invite everyone to please join us Saturday, July 24th at the Dragon Boat Festival. And I have some materials for the Commissioners, and then would like to leave a poster for the festival up in your offices if you'd like.
Very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone that needs to speak about this event? We're going to have public comment now. If there is no one that wants to speak, then we have a motion to approve PE 03-21.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you.
Shane. Text amendment 01-21.
All right. There's,
Can we ask you a question, kind of, that's not related to this one? Craig, would you ask him a question about, that you asked me earlier?
Shane, I don't know what our ordinances require, but is there a way that something like the Dragon Boat Festival and like firework permits and these kind of things can be handled not through the commissioners, just so that we can make it a little smoother transition? I mean, can it be done through the planning department?
it's possible. Of course, let me back up. Yes. But of course, it would require changes to the code of ordinances. But one of the more difficult things too is, should that be a staff decision when sometimes we've had some that's been challenging. So it may require layers where you've had a clean track record for 5 years, for lack of better phrasing, like the Dragon Boat. Is that one that staff can approve? So.
Well, what I'm saying is staff could make the recommendation and just be put on a consent agenda instead of having to go through a public hearing.
Certainly, and of course, that would just require changes to their notification, the timing of that. Do we receive that feedback at the staff level? And then, pass it on through consent. We received concerned emails or letters or phone calls. We could look at that.
If that's what y'all like to do.
You may want to wave a red flag and tell us that's a really bad idea and we're just not thinking through this right now, but maybe just make a mental note of that and you guys talk about it in staff, and
Sure.
if you think it's something that could be done more efficiently, then we'd be all for that. Or you may say, no, it's just a bad idea. Keep doing what you're doing and do that too.
Sure. We'll take a look at it.
All right.
Thank you, Shane.
Yes, sir. Well, one, there's no way to make this information exciting. And I'm not going to go through each point unless you guys have questions. I thought what I would do is hit a few highlights, but in terms of the staff memo, it provides a good background, I think, for why we're here. And the best, categorization is a modernization of the statutes, really taking 160A, which is a municipal reference statute, and 153A for county, putting them together into 160D. And You know, we generically throw that term around, but it's the one sheet of music that both municipal and county will be using for the purposes of development regulations. And within that definition, what we'll include and talk about tonight are the zoning, subdivision, flood damage prevention, historic landmarks, nuisance, and planning and development chapters of the Code of Ordinances. Hence why we just threw out the term text amendment. It's based on all of our Code of Ordinances. The one which we will not talk about tonight is the soil erosion and sediment control. That will be a little bit later. There's some other little nuances there. I will jump around quite a bit, but hopefully that this will be fairly straightforward. Nope, let's go here first. Within uses that are animal shelters and boarding kennels and whatnot, this more or less, in my opinion, is a cleanup of the language. In the middle, we talk about a outdoor run or a shelter for animals 100 feet from the property line. Seemed like a roundabout way of saying it. So we're cleaning that up, and then we're requiring screening up against those uses. This specific section deals with just the, or all except boarding, training horses and racing, but it's the animal services section. I felt it was a little bit easier to reference this section first, because that's operations that have outdoor runs that might not be a kennel, but the kennel text is actually here, and it just looks like brand new language. But we're separating the two to make sure the distinction is this is a shelter, kennel, and dog pound, and here's the standards. But really not much of a change. One that we are proposing a change, and I start with the actual table. A athletic field, baseball, soccer, football, multi-purpose, whatever. Currently, it's a special or conditional use in the RA district. That's probably the most common request we have. So right now, it's a conditional use permit, but there's very little standards and a lot that goes into that type of review. So being that we have a new CD conditional district option, this would be included as a new option under that use. And then there's also a standard here currently would be the same in the CBI district. And in that grouping, it's these membership and non-membership sports and rec clubs. So here's language in that 2164. This is the conditional district stuff. And that same reference is in the conditional use permit section. And then I won't go to the other, but if it's part of a major subdivision and you have a racquetball center, swimming pool, et cetera, uses in there, that's the membership, sports and rec that does not include these operations. It had so many uses and it felt like it was just too much to include, so we separated the grouping. And on that topic, I know we like to use acronyms and different terms that sometimes can be a little confusing. The statute change, we will no longer use the word conditional use permit or the CUP. It's a mandate to use the term special use permit. There's no difference. It's just terminology. We actually have that in the ordinance now dealing with non-conforming uses, a specific section that required a special use permit, but you may have seen one every 5 years. So now that's just the terminology, nothing else changes. In terms of minor changes to a special use permit or a conditional district, oddly enough, conditional is still with conditional district. It's not considered a special district. Now, these references here from the statute, you cannot change. These are staff level changes. If the board approves a special use permit and there's some nominal variation in the final site plan, this is our direction of when can we approve the change and when does it have to come back to this board. These two, per the new language, are removed. We can't approve density changes or any increase in building size. The board approves a plan for a 10K building. It can't be expanded by staff. It has to come back to the board if it goes anything over 10. That same language is in the conditional district section. The commission is required to reasonably maintain a comprehensive plan. So once we approve a land use plan, and then of course the terminology and what is reasonably maintained, usually you revisit it between 5 and 10 years. You make some effort to change. And of course that ultimately goes back to staff. It's not the commission, but that's the top of the chain. Planning staff, planning board, and then to the commission to maintain that plan. Otherwise, and there's actually some of the smaller towns, if they didn't have a land use plan, they're required to adopt one within the next year to be able to continue to have zoning. The planning board and well, let's jump ahead. Board of Adjustment is a general term most jurisdictions use for that board. We call them the ZBA or Zoning Board of Adjustment, but since they can theoretically adjust anything in the development ordinance realm, that's more of a general term. So Board of Adjustment, B of A, that board and the planning board ahead on the upper part of this are required to take an oath of office similar to the commission for new members and then those that have been reappointed. The planning department has a conflict of interest clause too, that if we, similar to the planning board and this board, if we have a conflict of interest, we got to find another staff member that can assist that individual. On notices, when we send out mail notice, the statute doesn't reference a distance. We've chosen 100 feet. Now within that calculation, we add whatever distance a street or a abutting railroad, some measure that's separating properties. You don't use that in your calculation. You add the 100 foot plus that width. Statement of consistency changes on text amendment. It's a little bit easier. It says a brief statement describing if the action is consistent or inconsistent. You got to think too with 160D, that applies to Rowan County, City of Raleigh, and all areas in between. So some places were making it difficult that once you got the text approval, then you had to go back to the plan and make a change to the plan too. This is stating that it automatically makes that change for you. You can't require a separate process. It kind of just makes sense, but being that there's jurisdictions out there that, you know, vary in how difficult they are to work with, you know, this provides that one approach. And of course, the statement for map changes is the same. Reasonableness. This is somewhat similar to in 2005, I think the courts determined a couple of tests that what is spot zoning. And it talks about, I think it was 4 different items. This largely includes those and then a few other all-encompassing public interest and, you know, the conditions warranting the amendment. So in a small scale rezoning, our statement of consistency does have a grouping here that the planning board will look at and this board will use too when you're making those small scale change in zoning. That is it for the zoning part, unless the board has any questions there. This one's a little bit more of a challenge. In 17, the statutes were changed. We did not make this amendment in the ordinance. And largely it was based on what does it really mean? And staff consulted with the School of Government and really didn't get a direct answer, because in some cases, especially in zoning, you might have to, what does the court say it is? Unfortunately, even though the ink's barely dry, you can't get that determination, which can be frustrating. But we checked with other jurisdictions, and some of which same situation. They not really sure, and they left it alone. But staff feels we do need to incorporate this unless we had later on an opinion where it could be tweaked or some other caveat added. The term, what we define as a minor subdivision, is a land split where both properties have public road frontage. Currently, that is the only way to divide land in the county unless you're creating a family subdivision. The owner is a parent, they want to gift their son or daughter a lot or sell, whatever. Then it does not have to have public road frontage. This is one, and kind of working right to the core of this language, the only caveat to this standard, and we'll go from there up, is it has a permanent means of ingress egress recorded for a lot. Doesn't say if it's public or private. So if you have that and you can meet all these other standards, you're in single ownership. It's not a group owning it. It's not exempted under this provision here, which is the 10-acre lots above. Hadn't been divided in this section in 10 years. And it's greater than 5 acres to start with. And then it meets all the dimensional standards, lot size, depth, frontage, et cetera. And it conforms to the use standards. So at that point, it's a requirement. We adopt it. We put it and just termed it minor special exception, because about 22 years ago, we had something very similar to this without the year and the 5-acre rule in terms of lots with private road frontage. So this will provide that offering if someone chooses to do that. We did include that if you use this provision, you can't further family divide that lot. Any questions on that? Moving on to the flood ordinance. 160D had several changes, and I think one of note that would be beneficial for the board. You don't see too many of these, but you did in 09 and 2018, the flood map. We will no longer have to treat that as a zoning amendment where there's a mapped component and development standards based on the map boundary. It's treated under these articles here, and let me get to the next section. There's a language in here, if based on a date, and all revisions thereto. It's my understanding that that will cover any future map change, with the exception, kind of wonder about that date. I think all revisions thereto means that any future map change will not have to be approved by the county. Once the state and FEMA approves the flood map, we don't have to come back in and rezone, or from a map standpoint, any change. I'm assuming that date does not have to change, but I have heard that it might. But nonetheless, it alleviates the mapped boundary standards of notification and ad in the paper. A simple ad for a text amendment would take care of this date should we get maps next year.
We've already approved after this date.
Sir?
So dated November 16th of 18, have we approved maps since then?
No, sir. But I believe we should get maps, and I believe next year. The language here on the elevation certificate, we felt that that was beneficial, that instead of requiring that for all projects, if there's something that had some level of construction or some basis in the design, that we could take other forms of information from a surveyor, it will help the citizen not have to pay for a full certificate. And all that is, of course, is a series of numbers from a surveyor, but we may not need all that. We may already have it with some other document. So this gives staff flexibility to not require that certificate. Only for the first two, a final is always required unless otherwise exempted.
Shane, I've got just some questions I'd like to frame here. Coming from a state with lots of water, I've been involved in this issue. And my question is okay, so we assuming adopt all of this, and what happens then to say, like in the city here, at the corner of Brenner and Jake, where eventually that road might just go right through there. And some of that property to me looks really low, and I think there's a creek that goes under there somewhere. So my question is as I was reading through this, I kept running into, floodplain, but it didn't really tell me anything about, is this going to change what people are able to do? Like, can someone come in that property and just fill it full of fill and take away any water storage, flood storage in that area?
That's where you get into the details of, if you want to, every floodplain is different. There's some that you can't fill at all in without some type of PE certification. There's some that you can with that same PE certification, but the degree of what you can do with it, if it causes a rise, then it can't be done unless you go back through this map process where you identify what impact would it have. And then you work, or you being the county and staff and the state, of what, with that documentation from the engineer, the model that's looked at. When it gets into something very extensive, it has to go through the state's NFIP engineer to review it and see what is proposed. But all the floodplain areas outside of that floodway, which you've got the center of the stream and then these left and right areas of the floodway, the fringe area is designed to be fully developed. But with that, there's still a review that has to be made of, does it meet the ordinance standards, which is a FEMA minimum. So this is in order to be a participating community, you have to adopt a FEMA compliant ordinance. So it's going to meet all their standards.
So that property, I don't even know if it's in the city or not, but does the county, do you guys have jurisdiction over all of the planning development?
No, ma'am. Right.
Thanks.
But the flood zones are mapped out by the Corps of Engineers, or who handles that?
It's going to be a contract engineer that the
From the
state works
state?
with.
Or
And then
the-
it's, right. And then they work with FEMA. Not all states are the same, but North Carolina is a cooperating technical state with FEMA. So with the map updates that we'll get, it's going to be based on new LiDAR that was taken, elevation points all over the ground. And we're thinking it'll be a new boundary of that flood boundary that's based on the new LiDAR information. There's only so many areas that'll be restudied because of funding. And that's primarily the thing. When you have more development and it changes the maps, there's only so much they're going to do, because we're competing with all the other counties. And usually, of course, when there's disasters and every time at the coast, those get high priority. And you'll find out how off the maps are.
But back to your point, the flood insurance is based upon the elevation at that point, whatever you're looking at. So the survey is important to the individual and to the insurance companies handling the flood insurance for the government.
And, I mean, I know it was a long time ago, but when I-85 went through, and went over the top of East Candace, and I believe it was the city at the time, we just gave the worst. So that's why I'm just kind of wondering about some of these things.
But of course, in the city jurisdiction, they have their own program that, for the most part, there's only so much flexibility you've got. You can have higher standards, you can't have lower. So they would have had to meet the minimum, which similar to ours. The few options we've got are just a freeboard or a little bit higher. I don't know what the city is, but we're probably at least a foot, if not 2 foot higher on the floor level. But as far as all the other stuff, the details, that's pretty basic of what you can and can't do. In the historic landmarks ordinance, we've got not many definitions, but as you can see, there was none before. And the one that probably a little bit painful here, we looked at it and it's pretty straightforward. At this point, once adopted, all members have got to reside on the Landmarks Commission in the planning and zoning jurisdiction of the county. It's different than all the other boards for some reason. Kind of have a bit of an idea why, but at the same time, none of the other boards are like that. So any applicants for the HLC would have to live in the planning and zoning jurisdiction. And one last section deals with the C of A, Certificate of Appropriateness. So just previously the House designated, if they want to add on to it, we got to determine what is it. Minor work kind of goes with what you would think, something staff can take a look at. It's very simple. Staff cannot deny a C of A unless action's taken by the HLC. So it's got a little fail safe in there to where there's still some involvement in that. And then a major change is anything other than minor. And that requires HLC approval through a special use type permit. It's a evidentiary hearing. And that is it. Of course, this requires a public hearing. We didn't receive any public feedback, really no directions from the planning board other than what you see before you. There is a statement of consistency recommended that's on your agenda link under the staff report memo at the very bottom, and it only covers the zoning part. Statement of consistency is not needed for any other ordinance, so just zoning. Any questions?
Is it going to affect anyone on the Historical Landmark Commission? Residency requirements?
That's a good question. We do have one board member that lives in the city, so we would have to determine what to do with that member. But we did have one, I think, at the last board meeting that was applying for the board, but we did mention this coming up here in 2 weeks. So that individual decided not to continue. So, but there would be one board member we'd have to look at.
So you're saying that if someone lives in the city limits, they can't serve on this board?
That's correct.
They still live in the county.
It's probably also at China Grove, maybe, anywhere we don't do the zoning.
That's correct. City and ETJ. To take it back a little bit, when John Holshouser was county attorney, we had this conversation back then, and it was kind of a bit of a question with the wording, but it's pretty strong and very clear that they can't. Why, I don't know.
Well, because they're being governed by their own set of rules. So the rules they live under, say Salisbury, those apply to them and they'd be voting on rules that don't apply to them. I don't think it's any more.
Well, I mean, if you live in the city, you can be on the county planning board, but you got me.
Could this be because of the fact, like the one we just had tonight, it lowers their taxes?
Well, being that the county commission will always be making the decision, I'm not sure if that's the case, but because again, this is a appointed board and I guess they are making a recommendation, so possibly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Shane? All right, if not, then we will conduct a public hearing. So there's a lot here. If anyone wants to get up and speak about this, love to hear from you. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And I have a statement of consistency, and I'll make this in the form of a motion. I move the proposed zoning portion of the amendments are based on North Carolina legislature's changes to the general statutes and are in the best interest of the public and the overall use of land. Is there a second? All right, Craig, second. Any discussion on that? All right, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Then do we have a motion to approve text amendment 01-21?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Judy second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Shane, thank you. I'm sure this was a lot of fun for you guys. And by the way, you did make it very exciting. Yeah.
How long did this actually take you guys? Like a year, maybe?
Off and on over a year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shane, and Ed and team. All right, Jim, financial reports.
Yes, sir. Good evening, commissioners. All right, thank you, April. As you can see in the first graph, this is our year-to-date expenditures through the month of May. We're at $132.7 million, which is $1.8 million less than last year at the same time. Next slide, April. Revenue through May is at $146.1 million, which is $11.9 million higher than last year at the same time. Next slide. A big piece of that, of course, is property taxes. We're at $87.7 million, $2.2 million more than last year at the same time, which this is through April.
April, can you move that marker, that talking marker? Thanks. Thank you.
Next slide, April. Sales tax through February, we're at $20.2 million, which is through February, $1.8 million more than last year at the same time. And then the final graph, April, which I think is interesting. As you can see, February, this is the first month over the past year that we are actually less than last year. Which for the month of February, we're at 2.174 million and this year, and last year was at 2.205. So that is it, unless anybody has any questions.
Second stimulus will hit soon.
Yeah, all indications is March looks pretty good.
All right, thank you, Jim. Any questions for Jim? All right, thank you, Jim. Anything we need to be thinking about, Jim? Any road hazards in front of us?
I hope not.
Come on. That's it. Best you got. I hope
That's
not.
best I got, yes.
All right, thanks. All right, item number 7 is budget amendments been provided for us. Motion to approve budget amendments.
Second.
All right. Craig motion, Jim second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anything for the team? Mr. Pierce?
I'm good.
All right, will you do the honors?
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right, second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.